Good evening, world. In order to answer the question, what is the meaning of life, we must first define what life is. Your secondary school teacher would have defined life as having the following characteristics: creates energy, having enclosed protective membrane, responds to its environment, produces waste, and reproduces. I am of course talking about the broad biological perspective of life, not the sum of your existence. What does this definition of life have anything to do with a person's accumulation of choices? Well, if all organisms were living to complete a common goal, the question of life could be easily answered. The function or what the organisms were doing would be their meaning to life. This unfortunately is not how the world appears to be. It seems that the meaning of life cannot be broadened to all organisms but to an individual. At the minimum, we know that an individual must stay alive, that something will not exist if it does not fulfill its function. Then life would not exist if it did not complete its function. Life does exist, so all life must have a function, which would be its purpose or meaning. Now going back to the definition, if you would notice it doesn't state what it is but what it does, and since we do not define a subject by what it does but what it is, this fails to be a definition, let alone a definition of life. This could be a good candidate for the function of life. However, even if we stated these traits as its function, it would lack purpose. Can an organism live without any of these properties? If we continue to use the same definition of life, we would find ourselves in a circular argument. As we could not define anything living without those properties, and anything with those properties would not lack them. Luckily, this classical definition is not the only one. A more modern definition of life is a characteristic that distinguishes objects that have self-sustaining biological processes from those which do not. In other words, things that can reproduce or repair. There are different ways to interpret this definition based on how you define self-sustaining biological processes, but to us the most basic way to self-sustain is to heal or to multiply, both forms of reproduction. If we follow this definition, the function of life is to reproduce. How do we define it? It is something that can reproduce. What does it do? It reproduces. Processes sometimes do need to be taken care of to complete this function. An organism may need to create energy, responds to its environment, produces or excrete waste, or may need an enclosed protective membrane. We find objects that have one or more characteristics but cannot reproduce, and we do not define them as living, but tools or machines. But you cannot find an object that multiplies itself without calling it living. If the function of life, then it is also the purpose of life as well. If life did not reproduce either on the cellular or organism level, life would not exist. When we refer to the meaning of life, we allure to a notion of a common goal or higher purpose than our own absurd existence. That scientifically is implausible. Life's purpose is to reproduce, to pass on a coded message from one generation to another. Passing a message over is pointless if it is not going anywhere. Life's goal of reproducing is pointless in itself. You could say that there is no meaning to life. But to say there is no meaning to life is not the same as saying there is no point to your life. They are two different perspectives. Meaning is left to the individual to perceive, not a species or all living things. The meaning to your life would be your function. What you do, why you are needed. We find meaning in family, religion, a career, or achievement. Everyone has things they find meaning in. This is what we live for, and we must embrace it, cherish it, because if it did not exist, we would not either. Purpose. It's what you say to yourself at the end of the day. Yes, I am something. I did something because I did X. I am part of Y, and I will accomplish Z.